281 days. That's how long it's been since the lights went out in Bahrain and the 2024 Formula 1 season got going. It's been a wild ride, full of excitement, pain, drama, pain, bottling, and last but not least, pain. 281 days, 24 Grand Prix, and yet we end at this piece of shit. My thoughts on the Abu Dhabi circuit are more than well known at this point. A pitiful excuse for a racetrack, which typically carries about as much excitement as one of Lance Stroll's orgasms. And yet, money talks. So, hey there guys, I'm Will. Welcome to FP1 and the final comedy review of the year. The end of term feeling felt much more real this time around. 2023's rendition carried the stakes of a Teletubbies episode, with all 10 teams sticking with their pick of meat going into the new year. 2024's farewell, meanwhile, has a lot more riding on it. We have a title fight for one, well, technically anyway, and several names drop off the grid at the end of the season, most of which we'll likely never see again unless you subject yourself to watching Formula E for some reason. With so much to talk about, let me waste a little more of your time by begging you to like, and begging you to subscribe, and begging you to join the Patreon, and begging you to follow me on every social media channel under the sun, because I'm a vain husk of a human being who lives off the little dopamine hits gained by you clicking on a button. Honestly, what the f*** am I doing with my life? Anyway, with that charming realization, let's get into the comedy review. It's the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. News, and how can we not start by bringing up for about the 849th time this season that Lewis Hamilton is entering his last race with the Silver Arrows this weekend. Yes, Mercedes this week decided they would bid #blessed farewell by reminding him of the times where they were actually good and not developing carbon fibre trampolines that are about as much use as new teammate Charles Leclerc's brain. The team also put out a tribute video left in black and white to cleverly avoid FOM copyright claims and voiced solely by children to help keep costs down. And that wasn't all, as Lewis's car this weekend will be adorned by the names of 150 AI bots who won some competition a few weeks ago, or the 150 AI bots who didn't submit the names Nico Rosberg, Diddy or Michael Massey. This was in addition to a new slogan stickered onto Lewis's cockpit, reading, "Every dream needs a team." A quote so inspiring, Lewis asked for it to be removed. Yet for a big farewell, this felt more like both parties were just glad to be ending a long, abusive relationship. Perhaps the only person who seemed genuinely upset was teammate George Russell, who spent the build-up fangirling like a Twitter user, then ambushing Hamilton on stage to finally sign his 15-year-old copy of his autobiography, which looked suspiciously like it was bought yesterday. George had far bigger problems coming into this one, as in Qatar he managed to rather frustrate a certain Max Verstappen, who was already having a bad week, having found out his partner Kelly Piquet was pregnant, and thus is about to ditch the Dutchman for the next up-and-coming fetus in the Red Bull Junior program. I have a full video on this F1 fight night already, but I just want to add hats off to the rest of the grid for acting as mature as my old high school group chat. Russell was the last to arrive at the GPDA dinner on Thursday, and thus the class of 2024 left the only vacant seat as the one right next to Verstappen. For the record, the comedy review is in full support of this behaviour. Returning to those leaving us at the end of this one, and it's becoming clear that several of the outgoing drivers had hit their no f***s given phase of their F1 farewells. Take Porridge Man casually outing his Sauber team on X, or Kevin Magnussen posting this photo to his Instagram, along with a caption suggesting he was about to enact a terrorist attack. Okay, turns out this last one was fake, but it was still too funny not to include anyway. Esteban Ocon was also taking the stance of, what are they going to do, fire me? Only that's exactly what his Alpine team did, dropping the Frenchman for new 2025 signing Jack Doohan in what would have been the biggest backfiring moment of the season, where they're not an Alpine engine involved at the back of their car. Apparently, the team were holding a post-season test with Haas hostage unless Ocon agreed to part ways early. Missing this would have compromised the start to the Frenchman's relationship with his new team, particularly after Nico Hülkenberg's attempt to show Esteban around his car didn't end particularly well at turn 1 last time out. Even so, it's a sad way to see a 5-year partnership end, though Alpine continues to feature in this comedy review, as it's time for X's Bell End of the Week. Woman. Oh, this is going to get me so cancelled. When Alpine affiliate driver Sophia Flörsch came across a motorsport.com article sucking off Lewis Hamilton, she decided it would be a perfect opportunity to embarrass herself. The piece involved Lewis claiming that if he'd ever set up a Formula 1 team, he'd sign up Mercedes F1 Academy driver Dorian Pan. And for those who have forgotten who she is, this is the driver who forgot what the checkered flag meant and thus lost her race win back in Saudi Arabia. Put your money where your mouth is, was Sophia's reply, suggesting Lewis wasn't spending his hard-earned offshore account on improving diversity in Formula 1. You can see how well this is going to end, can't you? A small Google search would have saved you from this idiocy, as Team LH flocked to the scene like a pack of sharks circling a clubbed seal. Except this was X, and everyone was acting like they'd been clubbed at an early age. This person was right though, as Hamilton has given a whopping $23 million to charity in recent years, which I'm sure some people will still argue is nowhere near enough, but anyway, here are a few of my favourite responses to Sophia's initial tweet. Put your brain where your mouth is. Don't worry about it, because he won't consider you anyway. Bro, who the f*** are you? Even Donald Trump ended up weighing in on this situation, claiming Logan Sargent is better than you flop ass. At the end of the day, I actually think this whole X war has been blown way out of proportion. You can call me a simp or whatever you like, but people forget just how much Sophia herself has campaigned for women's inclusion in motorsport. Look, here she is literally taking it to new heights in Macau a few years back. Thanks to those who submitted this for X Bell End of the Week, and if you would like to do my job for me, then you can use the hashtag on screen, tag me on the platform, or risk joining my Discord server. Anyway, I think it's time we got back to the action. Oh look, a new angle of 9/11. First practice for the final race of the season saw a whole host of junior drivers take to the track. Joining the greats were this guy who you've never heard of, this guy who can't drive, this guy who won't make it to F1 but no one likes him anyway, Verstappen Slave 206 and British Logan Sargent. Also in the field was nepotism, as Charles Leclerc and his little brother Arthur looked to make history by becoming the first brothers to compete as teammates. Charles would nearly not make it out, however, firstly due to endlessly shitting himself, and then because Ferrari had to replace the battery on his car, resulting in a 10-place grid drop for the Monegasque, but that's alright, they're not winning the Constructors' Championship anyway. Charles would at least find a silver lining by topping the session. Williams, meanwhile, were less fortunate, being on the other end of proceedings, while also facing hefty penalties for new parts. Superstar turned next coming of Mick Schumacher, Franco Colapinto, revealed he didn't like these new components, and thus proceeded to break more, ruling him out of the rest of FP2. His teammate, Alex Albon, would run into trouble as well, having to complete a lap stuck in third gear in what was secretly the team forcing their driver to go slow enough so to not hit anything for once. The afternoon would be ruled by McLaren, who bagged the top 2 times as Norris led Piastri come the end of the session, though it wasn't all plain sailing for the Woking squad, with both drivers needing to be reminded of Abu Dhabi's track layouts at points during the hour. Nico Hülkenberg would also surprise, ending up P3 in his last race for the Haas team, whose form continued to impress on Saturday morning. Both cars in the top 10 in the session once again dominated by Team Papaya. Red Bull were on their heels. Well, at least one of them was. Sergio Perez was 4/10 back from Max Verstappen, which we actually consider a win these days. The Mexican's imminent sacking is now not even considered speculation anymore. Red Bull's impressive show of confidence in the face of degeneracy is now worn thin, with crisis talks on Monday aiming to determine Checo's fate. Crisis talks, which I imagine will go down in history as the fastest decision ever made. In embarrassing scenes, the team has been forced to wheel out their esports drivers to teach the Mexican how to drive again, which has been filmed and posted to Red Bull's social media channels as the only lasting memory of Checo's contribution to the outfit. That being said, the only people still in the belief that Checo will have a ride next season is his dad and the man himself, adamant that he'll be in a Red Bull come 2025, before shitting on his entire team by saying it's, quote, unfortunate that Red Bull didn't try harder to win the Constructors. And you know what? He's right. It is unfortunate the team didn't euthanize him sooner. Danny Rick would at least have been remotely likeable, even if he would have been just as slow. Returning to FP3, and there were at least brighter skies for Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton, who had swapped chassis ahead of this final round, resulting in a magical return to form for #blessed, all while Russell drowned in their disability awareness car. Third going into quali, perhaps Lewis could finally get that fairy tale send-off after all. Except as Q1 rolled around, the Briton had picked up a different kind of pole as he revealed that he'd instead turned his final weekend as a Mercedes driver into one of those last-to-first challenges. Also, of all the corners to pick this up, it had to be this one, didn't it? Meanwhile, over at Alpine, unfortunately Jack isn't through to Q2. A good qualifying though. Yeah, Jack was 20th, and Ocon's wetting himself. The other Alpine of Gasly would go all the way to Q3, the other surprise in that top 10 being Bottas, whose tweet now might age like an FP1 video. On the subject of making bad decisions, Ferrari had seemingly mixed up their Leclercs, as Arthur was mistakenly sent out in Q2 and took the 16 car to only 14th after a track limits violation. Onward to Q3 then, and Max Verstappen got all of our hopes up when he almost speared his RB20 to the wall on the early runs, then still going fastest by half a second. That was compared to a Haas, to be fair, although Hülkenberg was on some next-level performance-enhancing drugs on Saturday, as he proceeded to slot into provisional pole in the dying seconds of the session. It wasn't to be, however, as Piastri soon displaced the German at the top of the times, Norris then getting the edge on both of them as he took pole for Sunday's Grand Prix. That caused Zach Brown to climax at the end of a thrilling final qualifying session of the year, only for celebrations to be ruined by the FIA as they penalised Hulkenberg, whose superb Saturday performance was tarnished thanks to the Haas driver thinking you're allowed to overtake in the pit lane now. Race day would open with Hamilton so done with his dream team that he entered the circuit wearing the blood of the man who cost him his Q1 exit. With our thoughts and prayers with his family, it was lights out, away we go, with a complete and utter show. Max Verstappen has been pretty good at coming down the inside of things this year, though he forgot to ask Oscar Piastri for permission down at turn 1. That sent both cars around as Norris checked out in front. I don't know what's more impressive, the Briton holding the lead off the start, or the fact that despite Max spinning to the back, by the end of lap 1 he was already ahead of Perez again. That was partly thanks to Porridge Man, who claimed Red Bull didn't like him very much coming into this one, and attempting to reconciliate by putting Checo around at the chicane, in a move that saw Leclerc glide around the outside of about 17 cars and into 8th. That crash would mark the end of the Perez hate-watch show, as the Mexican pulled over, or just gave up, and brought out the virtual safety car. That was enough time for the stewards to work out exactly what the happened on that start, awarding Max with a 10-second penalty for his incident down at turn 1. Piastri was furious over the team radio, calling the Dutchman's actions a move of a world champion. The Australian thus showed the Red Bull driver just how it's done by rear-ending Colapinto on the restart and forcing the Argentine to complete what we call sergeant laps as he trundled around with a puncture into eventual retirement. Norris held the lead then with a comfortable gap back to Sainz. With an opening stage so action-packed, it was easy to miss that Gasly was making up the rostrum and Hulkenberg was 5th in the Haas. That podium dream would quickly be thwarted by Leclerc, who pulled a stunning move around the inside of turn 9 as the Monegasque fight-back continued. His future teammate, Lewis Hamilton, wasn't quite enjoying things so much, still crying over the radio that he had no pace, unbeknownst to the fact that Mercedes had put him on mute back on the formation lap. The other Mercedes of Russell was stuck behind the Alpine of Gasly, which is like being held up by someone doing 45 in the fast lane. Gasly wasn't really defending, he was just existing in the most inconvenient way possible, like a French traffic cone with an attitude problem. Moving on, then Carlos Sainz claims he's not sad about leaving Ferrari and is instead excited about joining Williams in 2025, which is a complete and utter lie, but that aside, the Spaniard was now in the pits and getting a massive undercut on Lando Norris, getting the gap down to just under 2 seconds. Lawson was trying to get an undercut on someone as well, only his eagerness would get the better of him, as he left the pits with only 3 tyres secured to his car, before proceeding to drive around the track at an average speed of 500 km/h like a lunatic. Strategy was also up in the air for #Blessed, who hadn't been called into the pitch yet, out of fear his anger at the team might manifest into a game of bowling with the Britain's pit crew. Bono was on the radio claiming he had a cunning plan, which might have involved enrolling Bottas into his reserve driver role early, and instructing him to Magnussen down at the chicane. Only this didn't bring out the desired safety car and instead just ended the Finns' F1 career with broken suspension. A safety car was the last thing McLaren needed, with the Constructors' Championship still in the bag despite Saddam Verstappen's suicide attempt at the first corner. Oscar Piastri must not have got this memo, as he almost sent Yuki Tsunoda into the Abu Dhabi harbour with just 10 tours of 2024 remaining. With that title more or less secured then, attention was drawn back to the pair of silver arrows, Hamilton hunting down Russell on softer tyres, with half of the F1 fanbase egging him on in his final race for the team, and the other half praying for an almighty collision because it would be funny as It would come down to the final lap at Abu Dhabi, because of course it had to, and there would be a yellow flag, because of course there was. But Lawson identifying as an IED did nothing to stop Lewis Hamilton, who sailed around the outside of Russell to take 4th and complete a superb comeback drive. Only downside is he now has to talk to Nico Rosberg. Oh, never mind, apparently he's run away. Speaking of comeback, Charles Leclerc recovered from 19th to 3rd, recording more overtakes at Abu Dhabi than we've seen at this circuit in its lifetime, although Ferrari's eventual 2-3 finish wasn't enough, and Lando Norris crossed the line to take the final victory of the season and secure McLaren's first Constructors' Championship since 1998. Don't worry, Ferrari fans, I'm sure next year will be your year, as it has been for the last 16. It's been a thrilling year, so thrilling in fact even Abu Dhabi ended up being a somewhat exciting Grand Prix. If anything, this Grand Prix kind of summed up this entire season. McLaren versus Ferrari, Max attempting to hit anything he lays his eyes upon, and Perez being about as much use as his own contract extension. And really, this is just the precursor for 2025. 4 teams potentially fighting for the title, Lewis Hamilton in a Ferrari, George Russell and Max Verstappen murdering each other. It's going to be one hell of a year, and the comedy review is coming back, potentially with a few new additions as well, but I'll keep those under wraps for now. It's not been the easiest of years for this series. The battle with FOM has set us back, and I'll be honest, there was a point where I thought we wouldn't be able to finish out the season, but the support from you guys has been utterly incredible, so thank you so much for that. particularly to all of those who signed up to the Patreon, who get the uncensored original versions of all of these videos. And yes, I have just turned a heartfelt thank you into a plug. Now deal with it. Don't just sit there though, thinking that I'm going to retreat into my man cave to the new year. The videos will continue, and I'm not going anywhere. So get subscribed and like this video. I've got a lot planned for the new year, and you're not going to want to miss any of it. Thank you though for watching, and for one last time in the comedy review for 2024, have a good one.